Just bear with us 1 minute. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's get to it, Adam. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the second webinar in the Circular Fashion Pledge series. I'm your host, Monica Park, co-founder of Circular Fashion Group and member of the Pledge community. I'm thrilled to be with all of you this morning from California, and good afternoon or evening wherever you may be in the world. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm thrilled to be talking with my friend, Adam Siegel, founder of Recurate, a Shopify app that enables peer-to-peer resale directly on brands' e-com sites. Our hope is that this is a fairly informal but informative chat. And while Adam and I are going back and forth, please feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat. Asheen is here and is kindly monitoring that for us, so please feel free to weigh in along the way. All right, so let's get to it.
Great.
Adam, hi, yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for this conversation. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Yes, definitely. Adam, before we jump into it, we have a lot to talk about. I'm excited, but I just want to set the context for people just so they understand something about you. I want to take us back to earlier this year when COVID hit. It was obviously very challenging for all of us for a lot of reasons, but particularly it hit the industry, the retail industry, our industry, very hard. And at the beginning of lockdowns, I think everyone was sort of concerned, especially people like us, that sustainability, circularity would sort of go to the end of the list, the bottom of the list, and it would be just about survival, which is fair enough. But you, interestingly enough, kind of went opposite and doubled down and thought, well, I don't think so. I think circularity and sustainability are going to become even more important. And you ended up launching a business to disrupt it, and also this community that we're in right now, the Pledge community. So I think that's very interesting about you. And I just wanted to kind of start with that and kind of, can you take us back to that moment and what you were thinking and why you zagged when everyone was zigging?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I don't know if I deserve all of it, but I certainly appreciate it. And, you know, I think the reason is nothing more than just that I fell in love with this community. I had already been talking with a number of small and mid-sized fashion brands, and before the pandemic, and they were just so amazing people, amazing, innovative, creative brands, and I just loved the idea of what they were doing, especially because my background and interests are in sustainability and circularity, and I could just tell that there was such a strong commitment amongst these brands. And I got nervous at the beginning of the pandemic that all that stuff would come to a screeching halt. And so, you know, I was just talking with a bunch of those brands, and I think collectively we agreed that we needed to do something to show that there was continued support. That, and also I had promised myself and my wife and family that I was going to start a business this year, and so pandemic or not, here we are.
Great. I like to mention too, you had a newborn son, same year as you, just to make it fun. Your beautiful baby boy, Joe, who's doing well, growing just like your business. So we're going to get into all that. I digress, but I'll keep going. Okay. So we're talking about resale today, because this is really the space that you've committed to and which you're, you know, very nuanced your understanding of it. So I'm glad to share that with the community today. But I want to say, Adam, you and I know resale is of course not new. But the trend to buy and sell used is becoming more accepted and widespread. I think that's fair to say. And just to kick it off, from your perspective, what is really driving this behavior and who is driving it? What should we understand about this?
I think there's a number of trends that are coming into play. The way I see it most clearly is that there are third-party sites like eBay, this is in the US at least, eBay, Poshmark, ThredUp, The RealReal, Grailed, StockX, you know, there's a number of third-party sites, depending on the category, that have frankly made it cool to buy used products over the past decade. That it's affordable and it's sustainable, the most sustainable option, in fact. And so, you know, who I see driving that trend is primarily younger consumers. You know, at least in the US, we call them millennials and Gen Zers. And I think it's for the two main reasons I mentioned. It's more affordable, and, you know, frankly, They often don't have a whole lot of money to spend, but they still want nice stuff. And it's more sustainable. And frankly, I think they care a lot about that.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is a trend that's been emerging over the past decade, but it's now become a formidable industry unto itself.
Yeah. And do you still, from the conversations you've been having, do you feel that it's on the brink of being mainstream, or is it still really siloed, demographically? What's your sort of take on that? Like, just if you temp check where we are now.
I'd say, teetering on the brink of mainstream. I'd call it mainstream in certain categories or with certain segments of consumers.
Hmm.
But I also think that we're going to see a floodgate of brands entering the pre-loved or secondhand space, and when they enter, then it's going to be mainstream. You're going to see certified pre-owned, just like with the automobile industry, where the brands got the traditional, automotive producers got involved in used. I think we're going to see that across product categories.
Love it. Love it. And I know that just if we could, you and I can be a little wonky about these terms. How does resale? Can you explain to the group how resale fits in the wider framework of circularity and why it's an important tactic or channel or way of selling?
Yeah, and I think this goes to why also I wanted to focus on resale. For me, circularity is what I wanted to focus on most generally. And as I did my research, there's different business models that enable circular brands. I'll just share a few, like product rental, and in the U.S. That had become commonplace before the pandemic, and it was mainly Rent the Runway that was driving that trend.
Right.
And of course, the benefit to rental is that multiple people can use a single item.
Hmm.
There's also take back, recycling, refurbishment, rental, etc. So these are all, repair.
Yeah.
These are all different circular business models. But for me, resale, just to quickly define it and then describe where it fits in the concept of circularity, resale is just about selling the item to a second consumer after the first consumer is done with it and
Yeah.
continuing that on. The reason why it was of interest to me is because as I think about all of the circular business models, that one generally tends to be the most sustainable. If you have a perfectly good sweater or dress in your closet and it's going unused, but you can find someone who will use it, then getting it into their hands has very little environmental cost.
Hmm.
And now they can enjoy it rather than purchasing something that requires virgin natural resource inputs.
Yeah. And you and I were talking about, I think we were talking about Patagonia in this specific case, but about like the highest value items sort of winning, or sort of like survival of the fittest best item, meaning like ideally you want to design and create products that people want over and over again, even as they get used or reused, and they're made well so they can withstand that sort of robust, process. What do you think about that? Of just like, if we can take a wide
Yeah,
step back. Yeah.
I think that it's such a great point. I mean, to me, that's the vision that I see for the future of the fashion industry and consumer products more generally, is
Yeah.
that items are produced at high quality and therefore have high resale value.
Yeah.
I'll take the same analogy that I used before with the car or automotive industry. When certified pre-owned became a thing that customers were comfortable with, then the value of high quality, well produced automobiles, the value went up even more because cars can have a resale value, and that goes with really any category. But if we're talking fashion, certainly that's the case.
Hmm.
If you buy something that degrades with just a couple of wears and has a low resale value, well, then the value of that product in its onset and the value of the brand is frankly lower than if you can produce a high quality, long lasting good that has a resale value over time.
Right. And it's funny, I mean, I love to borrow from other industries in terms of products and quality and what we define as quality, but it's kind of like what happened in food is kind of like, this sort of awakening that we all have to know what's going in our body if we're going to eat it, like looking at the back of the ingredients, being like, what is all this stuff? I think that's sort of happening now in apparel to like not just the designers and product development people to understand, material components, but anybody, especially even you as an entrepreneur, say this phrase like know your fabrics, know what's in there, and kind of begin with the end in mind. That's the circular principle, is that you design thinking of end life and how to
Yeah.
break things down or how to be durable enough. So even you as an entrepreneur, I know you've been in the apparel space, but as not a product person per se or designer, what's your sort of take on that, and how do you talk to clients about that being kind of necessary to succeed in resale, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's simple. We go after and primarily have conversations with the brands that are already producing goods that have a high resale value,
Hmm.
and it's easy to figure that out. I mean, just go to eBay or Poshmark and search for the brand and see if there's a lot of products being sold
Oh, that's
of
smart
that brand.
to test the
Uh,
demand. Yeah.
yeah, and you'd be amazed. People are finding value in such a diversity of products and brands. I mean, I was even searching for a socks brand on eBay just earlier today, and there's tens of thousands of listings. So people are even hopefully they're not worn socks, but often it's perfectly new items that are just going unused, and there's an opportunity to find value in them.
That's great. So then transitioning into like the various ways that you can engage with retail, can we talk about kind of like, I think you always talk about three different resale models that are out there, and how should brands evaluate whether it's the right fit for them, whether they're ready, and can you talk to those constraints that you might have to consider?
Yeah, I'll lay out how I see the opportunity for brands, and like you said, I see three different models, and depending on the brand and depending on the product, one or two or three of these models makes sense for any particular brand. The first is not necessarily resale, but it's take back, just
Mm,
product take back. So you can imagine, again, we'll talk about socks or undergarments, for instance. If they are used, they're probably not going to be resold
mm, right.
online or elsewhere. And so the brand needs to figure out how to take back those items. Um, I've seen a couple really cool and super simple models for doing this. One is the Girlfriend Collective, where they have something like, I think they call it a give back bag or something, where they offer customers the opportunity to go onto their website and purchase a bag that gets sent to them so that the customer can fill it up with their used products and send it back to the Girlfriend Collective.
So they charge
Um,
the customer, right? And we were
they
thinking
charge
that's
the
really
customer.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they charge the customer. The finances have to work out for the brand and the customer, and that's not going to work in every case. But this is a really simple way to just dip your toe in the take back system.
Yeah.
And of course, once the brand gets those items back, they need to figure out what to do with them. So you have to either have a partner or your own sorting and processing and donation or recycling partner. But those systems are developing, and especially if you can get a volume of that product in one central location, then it has
Mm,
value.
mm,
Um, so that's the first. The second is what I would call consolidated resale. So that's where the brand either asks customers to send items back to the brand so that the brand can then resell it as pre-loved.
mhm,
Or maybe they work with a third party and the items get sent to a third party fulfillment center so that it can be cleaned, inspected, repaired if necessary, and
mhm,
then resold to customers. So you can imagine there's a range of products that would make sense for that system. The one biggest downside is that it's costly to
yeah.
do that. You need a bit of labor.
Mhm,
And then the third model, which is where I've been focused on with Recurate, is peer to peer, what we call peer to peer. And that's basically where the first customer will sell the item, list the item for sale, and send it directly to the next customer. So there's no third party, the brand doesn't take possession of it or anything like that.
Mhm.
There's one less shipping leg, and it's a much more scalable model just because no one needs to put their hands on it between the buyer and seller. It's
Right,
also a very common consumer behavior already right now
right,
because
right.
Poshmark, eBay, and other third-party sites use this peer-to-peer model. So, customers are used to this.
As you're listing those out, and I know that you and I feel similarly about this as professionals in the space, but we're always talking about it in the context of a brand controlled model or having the brands be at the table and have a say or some sort of control or sort of establishing the trust between the brand and the consumer. So even in all those three models, your peer-to-peer model is not on a Poshmark or an eBay or somebody on their Instagram channel. It's within the brand site, and that's intentional. And why do you think that that's sort of needs to sort of the next evolution, and why that's better for customers, how the brand should be thinking of this, and why they're an important seat at this table?
Right. Yeah. And first I'll just say, um, I'm not necessarily advocating for the peer-to-peer model as the be all end all. It's really dependent on the brand, their customers, the specific product categories that they sell, and that sort of thing. But to your point, regardless of the system that they use, um, I think it only makes sense for the brand to own that experience, because there's really only two options for a brand, which is to own the experience and to not own the experience. And I think if you're a smart brand, you'd prefer to own the experience because that promotes loyalty, that promotes repeat purchase, that improves the reputation with your customers because they feel like you're a responsible actor and you're thinking about not just selling them something but also providing an ongoing service. um, and frankly, they're already doing it. The question is not whether or not your customers are engaging in take back or resale. They already are. It's just a matter of whether they're doing it with you or they're doing it with Poshmark or ThreadUp.
Yeah, and you and I talk about, I think, in general retail, or it's all being kind of fragmented like this, and I think we're not going to step away from that. We're kind of moving away from the monolithic retailer wholesaler controlling the channels.
Yeah.
D2C obviously is big and convenient, but in resale, you and I always talk about, like, it's not about either or. It's sort of like you said, I even talk about shopping. You have you'll have all the tabs up. You're looking at Poshmark, you're looking at eBay. Why wouldn't the tab of the brand reseller be up there? And it's more like you want to be in that conversation. You want to be one option and kind of the best option, to be honest, to have the best experience, the best items, hopefully the best resale value, or like the pricing, getting the right buyback price or what have you, or the best items. You'd want as a brand want to have control over that. That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, again, you can think of the secondhand market as mirroring the firsthand market. And in the firsthand market, you have tons of options for where you buy and how you buy. You can go to a department store and browse a range of brands, or you can go directly to the brand's website. You can go to, your corner store in Lower Manhattan, or you can go to the chain store in Seattle or wherever else. And so you have options. But right now in the secondhand market, there's really not that many options. It's just not as vibrant of a market as the firsthand market. And I think it's going that way. That to me seems like the inevitability.
You and I also talk, I'm going to switch tack a little bit, about smaller brands who are starting out. There are some, maybe not complete non-starters, but some supply demand like realities that you have to face in terms of when you get into resale, just the practicality of you have to have enough pieces in circulation that have been produced to be able to take back and have like kind of the best of those items come back into your ecosystem. And then also there has to be enough awareness and demand for your items, that people know enough about you and think they're valuable enough to want to engage in a secondhand market. Can you talk about that a bit from your experience?
Yeah. So with resale, just like with anything, there's supply and demand. If you're producing just new goods and you overproduce, then you're going to have a whole lot in your inventory that go unsold. The same is the case with the secondhand market. But in this case, of course, you're not producing; you are just attracting um, past customers to either resell with you or to send back their items that they're no longer wearing. And you want to make sure that you match as best you can the supply with the demand. So what we do with a peer-to-peer model, the third model that I talked about, attracts sellers, but the inventory stays in their closet. So you don't need to take back the inventory. You don't have inventory risk or anything like that, and that's good. But of course, if a seller lists an item for sale, they probably want to sell it pretty quickly. They don't want to keep it in their closet for another 6 months before it gets sold. So you still need to match the demand to the seller's listings. And the second model where you take back the items before you then resell them, same goes for that as well. You don't want to be taking back more than you have the ability to resell, because otherwise your warehouse is just going to become bloated with used items. So yeah, I think there is a threshold that probably makes sense depending on the model that you're using. I would just a ballpark estimate, but somewhere in the order of 250,000 to $1 million in annual sales probably bumps you to the level where resale makes sense at any of the two final models. Anything less than that, you probably need to take back the items and find additional uses for it beyond just trying to resell it to customers.
Got it. And we've seen examples. I mean, there's the Patagonia examples where they open up their archive, which is really exciting. That's another tactic we could talk about that's different, sort of gaining interest and again, bringing that cool factor and sort of that limited release in the resale market. Kind of that energy around it. You can campaign. The pieces are great. They're good storytelling mechanisms too. But I've also seen, younger brands like Taylor Stitch actually bring out like an archive within their business. So they've had enough units, they sort of cross your threshold, you're saying, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a legacy brand and have all this history. It's sort of how you package it. And if there was demand for certain items that they're really efficient with how they, pre-order and like, manage their merchandise. But I think that's interesting that you can do it you can do it both ways. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I mean, well, first I'll just say, like, I think when brands get into the secondary market, they're gonna just explode the cool factor.
Right.
I mean, already we're seeing that, just like what you said with Taylor Stitch and Patagonia and several others that have branded their resale programs and break out the vintage items and frankly, another element of what makes resale so cool that I didn't mention earlier is that there's so much more uniqueness and diversity in the types of items that can be resold. I think we've over the past couple decades moved to a fashion market that's pretty monotonous, especially with fast fashion, where you just produce a million pieces and get it out there as quickly as possible. And I think people are craving something that's different now, once brands get into that, especially brands with some legacy, but you don't even need to have a legacy. You can make it really cool. So yeah, and with Patagonia, the one example you just brought up, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of days ago about how their vintage items, their vintage fleece in particular, is now that very specific item now has a serious resale market. Who
Mm,
knows? Maybe the value of certain items goes up over time and instead of down
right.
in the past.
I'm looking at the chat just to take a moment, and I see Sandhya Lang posted from Nudie Jeans. The Nudie Jeans team is here with us, which is amazing. They are doing great work, so shout out to them. Um, Always been in the cool factor, I think. So interesting. So I think that's good to keep in mind, that it's not just about legacy brands. Um, and I know that we have been, the ultimate goal of these programs is to keep items in use, but let's talk about these additional benefits that resale gets you. How it rewards loyalty, builds community, makes your brand more accessible to people who maybe find the price points, not affordable. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you've seen in your model?
Yeah, I mean the conversations that I tend to have with brands about their interest in engaging in resale is really just with regard to owning their customer. And you think about all of the items. I mean, I'll take nudie jeans just because you mentioned them. I looked it up on eBay and Poshmark, and there's thousands of pieces being resold. Of course, Nudie doesn't know who those people are, and they'll probably never know. So there are customers out there, Nudie Jeans customers, that Nudie Jeans will never know. And that goes with every brand. And of course, the preference is to know who your customer is, so you can communicate with them, you can build loyalty, you can bring them into your community. So that's usually the first benefit that brands tend to perceive. Um, of course, also, if people are buying your items on Poshmark or eBay or somewhere else, you don't benefit at all from that transaction financially. And wouldn't you prefer to take advantage of that transaction? Um, Also, a lot of resale programs, just the specific mechanism by which they work is to offer store credit.
Yeah.
So if a seller sells something, or if they give an item back, the brand will give them store credit. Again, promoting loyalty, repeat purchase
Yeah.
with the brand, and so all of that just has a wealth of benefits for bringing the customer back to the brand site, and building the loyalty and community around that.
I love that. And I think, like, if you and I can go, I'm going to ask something more provocative because I know it's a reality in our world that we face. A lot of brands, their hesitation for resale is that they're worried about cannibalization, being like, well, why would they get, we don't do a lot of discounting as a rule. We build in our margin because we have sustainable practices. I know what I say normally is I think you have to run towards it. Actually, your consumer is agnostic already. Like we keep saying, they're doing it anyway. Why not being more welcoming and inclusive of all that behavior, and at least be like, well, at least come to us and do that, engage in this sort of secondary market with us, and let's, like, know each other or combine the world. So when I hear that cannibalization um, argument, I always say that to people, and the people I've seen, C-suite and founders who run towards it and embrace it and say, our customer in the future, their closet's going to be rental, it's going to be resale, it's going to be new. We just want them to come to us for all of it. I think that's very smart and generous and future thinking. So I want to know what you think about that.
I think preaching to the choir. Very, very much agree with that. I can't remember if it was you, Monica, or someone else that told me that it wasn't that long ago that certain luxury fashion brands would pay the third-party sites to take down listings
Mm,
of their brand because they didn't want their items to be resold secondhand.
mm,
The perception from those brands was that it diminishes the value of the brand if people can buy it used at lower cost. I think brands now see it very differently.
mm.
Luxury, the secondhand market equivalent is the real, and they're now $1 billion company. I mean, these are unicorns that have been built off of the hard work of the brands that initially produce and market and sell these products. Um, and the way I see it with brands today, we rarely have a conversation about cannibalization, and I think that's because they see that their stuff is selling elsewhere, and so for them it's one of two options. I can own that experience and own that customers, or I can give them away to someone else like Poshmark or eBay. And so, the conversation about cannibalization in my mind is just an older way of thinking about it. It doesn't make sense in today's market.
Right. That's encouraging. So this is great. I think let's start talking about how you do this. Then, how do you start a resale program? What are you thinking when people are like, okay, this sounds great. How do I evaluate? What do I do? How do I start?
Yeah, it's so dependent on the brand and the products you sell. I know I keep saying that. But if you sell products that don't have a high resale value, then you need to think about how you take back those products and find a second life for them, either as donated goods, if they can be donated, and if there is value in the donation, or recycling, maybe textile recycling, which is getting better over time. Um, but the way I would think about it is to try to find the highest value use of your products after their first life or second life or third life. And so if they're perfectly good, high value, quality products in good condition, then you should resell them, get them to a new customer. And you can think about different methods of doing that. Recreate is one, and I'll show you what that looks like a bit later on this webinar. Um, but if your items tend to need repair, or cleaning is critical, which certainly the case for certain types of items, then you need to find a way to take it back and find a partner to do that. And I would encourage brands to start simple. You don't need to go all in from the beginning. Develop an MVP, test it with a subset of customers, get feedback. Just like you do with new product development or new features on your site or something like that, and build it out over time. Don't invest a lot from the get-go.
I love that, Adam. I'm just checking in with the chat. Some good questions coming through from Natalie. Regarding what we were just talking about is, hey gang, I'm curious what your thoughts are on inventory destruction, be it calling it out, incentivizing accountability in the space, or regulatory penalties for the carbon and pollution, which accompanies the destruction, often incineration. So I have to think that brands who step up and place themselves above the practice are going to get a huge bump in consumer confidence, and that those who do will be scorned. So this is a practice that is a reality. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily directly related to resale, but yeah, I mean it's a really poor practice. It's a poor practice because the brands have poorly estimated the demand of the product, and so they have excess that they need to get rid of, and the brand has a belief that if they flood product into the market, that it's going to diminish the value of the brand or the brand perception. I think there's plenty of practices that exist these days, from predictive analytics that can predict demand better, to pre-order, so that you can get a sense for the demand and actually know your customer before you produce. And then, of course, supplementing new product production with the sale of used goods. And that can help you right size your new product inventory as well.
I think too, and you back me up on this, the new brands are the brands of the future, and the ones who are making the transition, who have been around. It's like, it doesn't even come into question that that's an option. I think there's an awareness. I think, the problem with our industry for a lot of time is that it was so opaque as a rule. It's like you couldn't see into the supply chain as a rule, and the brands who were powerful controlled everything, and they could do kind of things with impunity. And I think that's definitely been changing in the last 10, 15 years. And I'm thinking, so to answer Natalie's question, I think like it's almost going to be shamed out of it. I mean, there's still going to be inventory problems, and that's another thing we can talk about is putting new items or returned items into take back channels. Is that really real take back? Do we quibble with these purity tests? Is it important though that customers know, like, these are also like, surplus inventory channels. It's another way to sell under the guise of it's more sustainable, and we have to watch that greenwashing line. But that is a reality, especially this year with all the supply being, surplused because the channels were closed.
Right. Yeah, I that's happening certainly. That brands are using resale channels as a way to offload their excess inventory. That's of course not true resale. That's not a sustainable option, and certainly shouldn't be seen as such. If it's a small volume, then I can understand it. But if it's a significant volume, well, the brand's just losing money. I mean, they produced too much, they couldn't sell it, and so they have to offload it cheap. I mean, that's never a good business practice, regardless, but certainly not a good environmental practice either.
Right. And if I can be a devil's advocate, I've seen corporate programs start that way, meaning they didn't have a whole, you have to, like, back to our, you don't have the supply that's already coming back. Your customers aren't used to it. So you have to start somewhere.
Right.
So a lot of people use that as a tactic just to get it going, to get that flywheel going, as they say. It's a little like on the line because, you're like, yeah, but this stuff isn't coming from closets yet, but they're trying to make that transition to get the kind of machine moving and then
Right.
make, less of that and more of direct take back from closets and
Right.
garages. Right.
Yeah, and for that I'm much more comfortable. I mean, if it fulfills the mission of producing of generating a robust resale market for your products, then maybe you need to do that to overcome the static friction.
Mm.
If you see for forevermore this being a channel to offload significant excess inventory, well, then maybe you need to rethink your production practices.
Fair. We have a great question coming in from Walker. Hi, Walker. Could you address international resale markets, specifically thinking about used products where there isn't a market in the US?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw that question come in as well, and how I interpreted it at first was how robust is consumer demand for used products around the world? And let me answer that first, in case anyone's interested in that. From what I see in the U.S., it's growing like crazy, especially in the past decade, like we've been talking about. Canada, same situation. There's a number of third-party sites. Across Europe, we're seeing something similar, especially in Western Europe. In Asia and South Asia, I think less so, because the perception of used is very different than it is in Europe and the U.S. And then, across places like Africa and South America, frankly, I'm just less sure. But I think, Walker, if I understand your question correctly, it's if there isn't a market for a particular category of used products in the US, is there a market abroad? So maybe after the first use of a particular product here in the US, can you resell it abroad? I think the answer is probably yes, but it's probably just dependent on the product category.
Mm.
I think about take something, this is very specific, but ski gear. Some people like upgrading to the latest ski gear every season. The season's only, say, 3 to 5 months, and so they buy it at the beginning of the season. They have it they use it through the season. They'd probably want to get rid of it in the summer because they're not using it. It's just taking up space in their closet. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, you could sell it to folks in the southern hemisphere that are going to use it for their winter while it's your
Right.
summer, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
So again, it just goes to highest value use, and sometimes there's certain geographies where it might have a high value use, whereas your existing geography in the U.S. or elsewhere, it might not be as high value in that moment.
I don't want to derail us too much, but what you just said made me think about, at least in my experience practically, the typical retail calendar or the marketing moments, so to speak. You almost want to go off that for sure for resale and be like, yeah, think of like seasonal when you're cleaning out your closet, or if it's in January when everyone's fresh start and doing all those things, or like right before school or something like that. There are these moments of actually if you would want to market or like do a take back program or give us your stuff sort of mechanism. It would probably be in moments that a regular marketing team won't be used to. It won't be, holiday time or when they're buying. It's a purchase moment. These are take back moments when you're cleaning things out and gonna the other side of the marketplace. So I don't know. I think that's
As,
interesting.
as we are launching with brands using Recurate, our hypothesis is that one of the best times for resale is going to be January, February, March, Q1.
Yeah.
And that's because people have now too much stuff
Yeah.
from the holidays.
And post holiday.
Everything's
Yeah.
gifted, all their the cheap stuff that they bought over the holidays. Now they have it, they want to get rid of it, and people are looking for post-holiday deals. So yeah, I think very much so. It's off cycle from the traditional selling seasons.
Yeah, and for the digital marketers in the audience can appreciate, I know it's a lot more affordable in January, like, compared to the competitive rates in, November, December. So that's also super
And you know,
practical.
you as a brand, I'm sure this is obvious to the brands on the line, but you're always looking to find more touch points with your customer. And of course, the holiday seasons and the traditional selling seasons are where you make the most touch points. But you're also customers are also bombarded by everyone else. So this now provides a way for you to engage your customer at times where they may not be swamped with marketing messages
Right.
from so many brands.
It's a new world, so it's new tactics. So it's exciting if anyone else wants to test any of that and let us know how it goes. I think we have pretty, I would take that bet that it would be the right time. Just want to circle back. Faith jumped in and had a great point when we were talking about new markets and testing demand, that it's important that when going into new markets, you make an assessment to make sure you're not taking out of a local economic system, which is helping those in that community. I thank you for saying that, Faith. I think that definitely grounds everything we do when you're looking at alternate markets, with this sort of affordable. It's basically a value price point play too. So I think that's important to understand and respect the local markets.
Yeah.
So I want to segue into your platform, and also, we mentioned you're a Shopify app. What can you take us through the process of why you aligned with the Shopify ecosystem and how you've seen that be a benefit, and what's your take? Why did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, Shopify is growing. It's an incredible platform. It's only, I think, a decade, maybe a little bit longer old, but most direct to consumer brands, the digitally native younger brands use Shopify for their e-commerce platform, and it's awesome. It's really easy to integrate with. It's highly flexible, and the brands that, again, this is a hypothesis, but in my mind, the brands that are most likely to care about resale are those younger, more creative, more innovative, more forward-leaning, digitally native brands. So they tend to be on Shopify.
I love that. Sorry to bounce around a bit. I just want to get this question that came through the Q&A. Back to market demand. How can a brand test if there's a resale market for their product in their country? That's a good
Oh,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's easy. I mean, you can overcomplicate it, but the reality is, what's the third party site that's most likely to sell your product? Go on there and search for it. I
Hmm.
mean, in the US, I keep calling out eBay and Poshmark and others. I mean, if ever I'm uncertain whether or not there's demand for used products for a particular type of product or a particular category, I just go on eBay and I search for it. And amazingly, consumers always surprise me. There is stuff being resold. One man's trash is another man's treasure. There's stuff being resold across product categories, across brands. So, it's not hard to figure out if there's demand. You just need to search.
And I'm going to throw one in, also to look at Facebook and just see what those like informal groups are doing, because they're also doing a lot of trading, and you can just see in Facebook what people are doing, or even Instagram, so people selling directly from their own closets. So I don't know. I'm definitely not the social media person, but I think like that's a good gauge of demand too, and where the communities are kind of trading. Yeah.
The Facebook one is great. There's a few brands that that we're working with today that have had really robust Facebook communities,
Oh, interesting.
in the thousands of customers, that are gravitating to their Facebook groups because, not just because of the brand, but because of the ethos of the brand. So they truly did create amazing, very vibrant customer communities. And part of each of those communities was buy, sell, trade.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you had a product of that particular brand, you could take a picture and post it in the Facebook group, and then others could buy it from you right there. Of course, Facebook is not a great experience for doing that, and so we've worked with brands to take it out of Facebook, put it directly on their website, make it look beautiful, and make a really seamless experience. And again, that's just one more touch point and a way to build community. So yeah, wherever your community is, if you have community, they're probably doing this already. It's worth looking into it, and that's a great way to gauge demand.
You can
I
also
love it.
do the Ask Mr. Google, do the Google search and see like used product, whatever. You know, I always love to see what the results are. So
Yeah, it's not hard. I mean, it's not hard to find where the demand is for your used products. I mean, intentionally it's very public because the sellers want to sell stuff and the
right.
buyers want to find it.
That's amazing. Well, without further ado, I'd love to have you walk us through Recurate and see what this solution is that you've created.
Great. Yeah, so I'll share my screen. You know, the intention of this webinar is certainly not to promote what we're doing. Again, my primary interest in this whole topic is just getting as many people, as many brands, as many consumers as possible involved in circularity and in resale, because it is the most sustainable way to shop. And you know, we're one solution of many. We're a very simple solution brands can implement in a week. You'll see it's a very simple, seamless, and scalable experience for the customers. But of course, there are other solutions, and it, like I have said several times, it really does depend on the type of brand, your specific brand, and your type of products.
Great.
But what I'm going to do is walk through. So can you see my screen now, Monica? Great.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to walk through what I call a fictional web store. In this case, Lucy Jones. And I'm actually going to start from the beginning of the experience, which is right here. So we're going to start by buying a brand new item. In this case, this two-piece suit. And we'll start by adding it to our bag and checking out. Just like normal, we haven't changed anything. This is, you know, every e-commerce store, especially every Shopify store. And then your customer wears the item for 6 months, or it might be 6 years, but eventually it's not her fit or style anymore, and so she wants to give it a second life, you know, a new home, and make some money from it. So with Recurate, instead of her going to Poshmark or some third-party site, she would go directly back to the brand's website where she bought it, log in to find her purchase history. Here she's purchased 3 items from Lucy Jones in the past, and our integration adds this sell used button. So if the customer wants to sell this item, they just click sell used. We're connected with the product catalog from the brand, so we know the purchase price, the purchase date, we have the original imagery and descriptions. So we're starting the listing with 80% of it complete already, which makes it super simple for the seller. But the seller will add their own images. They'll mention the condition of the product as it exists today. We recommend a sale price, but of course the seller can change it, so they get to decide for themselves what they want to sell it for. And then they click sell used. So to list an item, that's all you need to input. It's very simple.
And I know you have a mechanism of getting store credit.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll continue the process with just a bit more information just to show you the whole journey. So when the item is submitted by a seller, the brand gets to approve or deny that listing, and they have information about the seller and information about the products right at their fingertips to make that decision. Let's assume that the store admin approves it. What happens to it? It appears directly on the brand's website. So here we are in Lucy Jones's site in a new collection. Here we're calling it the pre-loved market, but you know, make it on brand, make it cool, make it, you know, integrated to who you are. And how can you think about this pre-loved market? It's basically like a Poshmark store or like an eBay store, except it resides directly on the brand's website. And it's a much better online experience than one of those third-party sites because we're using the original brand imagery and descriptions. So it's all beautifully on brand. It's seamlessly integrated to the website. You have a great browsing experience as a customer. And if you want to buy a used item, just like buying new, you click into it to see the PDP, and you can check out right there. So buying used and buying new, it's just as easy. You can buy some new items and some used items in one shopping cart and check out with both new and used together. Um, so just a very on brand and seamless experience if you're the buyer. I'll share just a couple more things. There's certainly a good bit more to it, but um, just to finish the process, when the item is sold, we generate a shipping label and we email it to the seller. They then have 3 days to print out that shipping label and send the item to the buyer. It's very rare for sellers to be late. They take their role in the selling process very seriously. And then when the item is delivered, we ask the new buyer to confirm the condition of the item. And if the item is in good condition, in the condition that it was advertised, then and only then does the seller get paid out. And there's two options. Brands can decide which of these two they want to offer to sellers. But right now, every brand offers the store credit payout, and only a handful of brands even offer cash. But the brands can choose which percentage they want to pay out in cash or store credit. And not surprisingly, brands tend to offer more store credit to encourage people to take that option and to stay within that brand's community.
That's great, Adam. I'm just looking at the chat. Great question from Walker, and you see this practically. You know, the cannibalization question still is real. That when you have the buy used cheaper option, ostensibly next to the next to the new item at full price. Have you seen evidence, like with the click through, the data that doesn't cannibalize? I have some anecdotes from my experience, but I really want to hear from you.
Yeah, we're too young to as a business to have enough data to say concretely. But interestingly, I mean, just for what it's worth, we've talked with hundreds of brands, and it almost never comes up, the question of cannibalization. And I think that's because they know that their customer is going to other websites to buy their products used. And so, the option exists whether or not it's on your website.
And I'll just share, Walker, too, like from the Patagonia and the REIs who've been in this space for a long time. Patagonia just put the buy used next to the buy new. Like Adam's built that into his platform. The fact that Patagonia is doing that, REI is doing that, I'll share, like that's a seal of approval, a confidence that they think, like, this is very key to our experience. So they've made that mechanism very clear on their site. I know from the digital ads, there was concern when you run a new next to a used ad, is it going to be a mass exodus then, even from the paid search or the paid ads, that people are just going to buy used? In my experience, we found that both rose. So it wasn't either or. Actually, the data was, they both went up. I don't know how that happened. The data was the data, but they're kind of like, it's not either or for the shopper. It's just more
Also,
exposure for the brand. Yeah. And more
I
options to
think
buy.
I think it's potentially different shoppers as well. You can
Yeah.
imagine if you get into the mind of your customers, there's probably the customer that first thinks, oh, I'm interested in this brand, let me go to Poshmark. And then there's another customer that says, oh, I'm really interested in this brand, let me go to their website.
Yeah.
And so, you're trying to take some of those that first category of customers that wouldn't necessarily think about you first, and bring them back to your site.
Yeah. So more to come. I think the data will be really interesting to validate those early assumptions. Another question from Mary Sue, which is great. Do you suggest that all resale sales are final? That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. So again, this is a pretty common practice through third-party sites right now, and so there's common policies around it. For the most part, it is final sale. So if it doesn't fit you, or if it's not a color you like, or something like that, well, you purchased it, and with accurate information. So that's yours now. But of course, we want to give the best possible experience to customers. And if there are cases where the product was incorrectly advertised on the site,
Mm.
so imagine, I wanted this dark green sweater, but it arrived and it's dark pink. or or it's not my size, or it said it's in perfect condition, and I open it up, there's clearly a hole. Well, then, of course, you want to provide a good experience for your customer. In the case of Recurate, we work directly with the brands to provide a number of buyer protections to ensure that they have the best possible experience. And in our experience so far, the vast majority of transactions are extremely positive. But yeah, you do want to mitigate some of the potential for risk.
That's when your wonderful CX team, like they always save us. They always are those frontline relationship builders, and like I've seen it too with the resale. They just do a different kind of FAQ. They're very generous, and they treat your customers well. They get ahead of it and understand those resale related questions, and then make sure the experience is really positive for them.
Yeah, yeah. Make sure you set your customers' expectations appropriately. Be open and transparent from the get go, and every customer touch point that they are buying a used product, they're buying it from another customer in your brand's community, and what to expect. But then also provide the seller with the right tools to be able to and instructions and guidance so
Yeah.
that they're providing an accurate listing. And when they're shipping an item, they ship a clean item, they fold it nice, they pack it well so that when it arrives, it's a positive experience for the buyer as well.
I love that. And Adam, I know, and group, I think we could keep talking for another hour. There's so many things that this is sparking. I hope that people follow up with you, Adam, to ask more questions about what you're doing. Same for us. If you have any questions and for the pledge team to help you navigate this new and exciting space, we are here. And I just want to, in closing, Adam, we ask all our webinar participants if there's one thing you can ask of this community and give to this community, what can you offer us? We just like to engage a little further.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I would provide my experience or expertise, if you can call it that, on the resale market. So if anyone wants a consultation, maybe we can take 30 minutes sometimes in the next few weeks. And it doesn't have to be about Recurate, the specific platform that I just walked you through. But if you just want to explore or brainstorm options that would make sense for yourself, I'd love to have that conversation with you.
Great. And how, and what would you ask of this community then? If that's what you're offering.
Um, do an evaluation of your products and see what's happening to them after their first life or second life or third life. And then start to, if you're not doing this already, I think a lot of you are, start to think about what is the highest value use for those products after their first lives. And then start putting simple systems in place to address that.
Love it. So where can people find you, and what's next for Recurate as we close out?
Yeah, you can find me online at recurate.com or email me at adam@recurate.com, or in our Slack community. Feel free to reach out anywhere. What's next for us? We're launching on a handful of progressively bigger brands websites over the next couple of months, and crossing our fingers that more and more brands see the light and the opportunity in resale, and so hope to continue to build that momentum through the first half of next year.
Love it. Thank you, Adam. This was a pleasure. I
Thank you.
enjoyed it. We should do it more. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We have many more webinars coming up every week, so stay with us, stay tuned, and to learn more about this collective work we're all doing. So thank you again for your time and your great questions. Thanks, Adam.
Well, thank you, Monica and Asheen, and the whole community. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Asheen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.